Hey y'all, welcome to the channel. Today we're checking out how do you start a new country.
The word country can be hard to pin down. It can be nation state, the outdoors, or a genre of music.
But how does a country become a country?
Hang on, I have to see that photo.
But how does a country become a country? In today's programme, we'll look at what it takes to change the world map.
Welcome to Map Men.
We're the men,
And here's the map. Map Men, Map Men, Map Men.
The world map is reassuringly solid, with clear, thick black lines to let you know what's one thing and what's not that one thing.
Right.
It appears so fixed, people are willing to get it tattooed onto their skin.
What does that say? Got lashed here. Is that Myanmar? What country is that? It is Myanmar. Hey! United States public education system.
But of course, the world map does change as new countries spring into existence.
The most recent examples include Timor-Leste in 2002, Montenegro in 2006, and...
Brief gap for you to show off by shouting the next one. I don't know what it is, and I even just heard him say it.
South Sudan in 2011.
Okay.
The good news is, anybody can claim a country. All you have to do is say, this is mine. The bad news is, getting the rest of the world to agree with you is mega hard.
We're going to have a look at what separates those who have been successful from those that have been not, or unsuccessful.
And few people have been more not successful than Englishman Stuart Hill, who in February 2011 founded the country of Forvik. Stuart Hill's story begins during a failed attempt to circumnavigate Great Britain in a rowing boat with a windsail stuck in it.
What year is
After
this?
8 expensive rescue call-outs, Stuart wound up in hospital in the Shetland Islands, from where he soon discovered the tiny uninhabited island of Forvik.
Stuart liked Forvik so much, he set his sights on being the supreme ruler of it.
After doing lots of careful reading into the history of the Shetland Islands, he summarised what he read into a dubious argument that they were technically still part of the Old Norse Empire.
Hang on, what's this guy's name?
Discovered
Stuart Hill. Oh, there he is. Hey, Stuart. Captain Calamity. He was born in 1943, so this is recent. I want to find a photo of his boat. That's his boat. All right. Gotcha.
February 2011 founded the
2011.
country of Forvik.
Stuart liked Forvik so much, he set his sights on being the supreme ruler of it.
After doing lots of careful reading into the history of the Shetland Islands, he summarised what he read into a dubious argument that they
What does that say? Really long history book.
were technically still part of the Old Norse Empire, not Scotland, and therefore Forvik was free to claim. First Minister,
Stuart Hill.
population,
Stuart Hill.
name,
Stuart Hill.
Stuart was so convinced of Forvik's sovereignty, he refused to pay vehicle tax and was sent to prison. Stuart issued a statement saying,
I'm right and they're wrong. Stuart Hill. Although his country has a flag and a website, Forvik remains part of Scotland on all world maps.
except those drawn by Stuart. So how do you
Forvik, mine.
go about creating a new country that appears on everyone else's world maps?
The thing you need to get most maps to give you a thick black outline is a seat at the United Nations, the international body that agrees international things.
But how do you get that seat? Whose email address do you need? Should you sign off yours sincerely or yours faithfully, and will that make the difference?
The UN have a strict set of requirements all applicants have to meet in order to be considered. The first of which is,
do you have a historical connection to the land?
is this where Stuart, an Englishman claiming part of Scotland, went wrong? What if Stuart's family had lived on Forvik for thousands of years? Is an ancestral link enough to convince the UN you're a country? Let's look at an example that
Probably
answers
not.
that very question.
The Black Hills of northern USA have been the ancestral lands of the Lakota Native Americans for centuries, and in 1868, the US government recognised this in a treaty that promised the land to the Lakota forever.
I have to read this. Dear the Lakota people, hello, it's the United States here. We're just in the process of spreading our country and all the way across this vast continent. We're doing really well right now. We've reached the West Coast without even properly filling in the bits in the middle. Go us. Anyway, because we're nice, one patch of land that we're definitely not going to claim as part of our monstrously expanding country is the mountainy bit that you guys live in. Seems only fair. You were here first, and it's rubbish anyway, so we don't want it. Oops, we wrote that part out loud. Sign here, and we promise never to occupy you ever.
But forever did not, it turned out, mean until we find gold, which happened shortly after.
The Lakota were offered compensation of $500 million for the stolen territory, but they've always refused the money, insisting their ancestral lands are not for sale.
In 2007, the Lakota of Dakota declared an independent nation of Lakota, breaking away from the United States, taking with them the giant faces of 4 American presidents in a mountain.
With the legal treaty providing indisputable evidence that the Lakota technically owned the land, surely the UN would make good straight away and confirm a shiny new country.
Unfortunately for them, their coloniser also happened to be the richest country in the world, with enormous influence on what does and doesn't get ratified.
Yeah.
America looked at their proposal, thought very hard, and said no.
And absolutely nobody was surprised.
Hard evidence in the form of clear documentation wasn't enough to get independence. But consider this example from the other side of the planet, a claim to independence based on a lack of documentation.
The Murrawari Aborigines have never accepted that their land officially belongs to Australia. Nobody ever signed a treaty with them, beat them in a war, or even so much as set foot in their territory when Australia was founded.
Wow.
In March 2013, the Murrawari wrote a letter to the Prime Minister of Australia and the Queen of England, head of state in Australia, long story, asking to see documents proving that Australia were their rightful owners.
Dear the Prime Minister and the Queen, we've lived here for centuries, long before you lot showed up and founded the nation of Australia. As far as we're concerned, the founding of Australia hasn't affected us at all. We weren't Australians to start with, and we're not Australians now. Sorry for leaving it till now to bring this up. Just double checking you're okay with us announcing ourselves onto the world stage and ideally becoming members of the UN too. Not that it's any of your business, but we thought it was polite to check since most world maps show our country as part of your country. Obviously it isn't, but you guys know that anyway, I imagine. Please do let us know if you have any documents disputing this or if you'd like any more info from us. Good.
After 21
Great.
days, the Murrawari decided to interpret the ensuing silence as recognition. In March 2013, they formally declared the continuance of their statehood
Good for
and asked
them.
the UN to recognise a new country twice the size of Denmark.
But without any real geopolitical power behind them, the UN just loudly ignored their declaration, to this day leaving Australia in charge of collecting Murrawari bins.
So sometimes you need to do more than politely submit a proposal. The UN might also consider,
Have you fought any lengthy or bloody civil wars?
What do the posters on his wall say? Fulfill your potential. Become a country today. Join the world stage. Wish I could zoom in and read this. I can't see it. They went through the trouble of printing out these posters. Set design.
And really sit up and pay attention, you need what's creepily referred to as a monopoly over violence, or total military control.
this can be a surefire route to recognition. Examples include Bangladesh, Venezuela, the USA, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, India, Pakistan, Algeria, Latvia, Namibia and Portugal, to name but 12.
A more recent and more ongoing example can be found in East Africa. When ex-British Somaliland got independence in the 60s, they joined with their ex-Italian neighbours to become one happy Horn of African country.
This happiness quickly became unhappiness under a brutal dictatorship, and, following a devastating civil war, Somaliland once again declared independence in 1991. Today, Somaliland have their own separate military, passports, even currency.
Somaliland sent a request to the UN asking for their seal of approval, but despite fitting all the criteria for becoming a new country, the UN still hasn't lifted a finger.
What does it say? Big news from important countries, not Africa, obvs.
It doesn't help that other African nations refuse to acknowledge Somaliland's independence. Countries like Mali and Morocco,
Why?
with separatist movements of their own, are terrified of an independence domino effect.
So Somaliland remains in limbo as an autonomous region of Somalia. Despite its clearly enforced border, Google Maps doesn't even bother with a dotted line, let alone a solid one.
I wonder if that's still the case now. Yeah, there's no line at all. Not even a dotted line. If it's not on Google Maps, it doesn't exist.
Why is it so hard to get the attention of the UN? How come Somaliland didn't manage it, but South Sudan did?
South Sudan successfully became the world's newest proper recognised by the UN country in July 2011. Exactly like Somaliland, they had a historical claim to their land, fought a civil war, and were just as politically obscure in the eyes of the world's richest countries. So what was that final missing piece that made the UN pay attention?
Hello, I'm George Clooney, and I think South Sudan should be a new country.
That's
Very
why.
Hollywood humanitarian George Clooney has been raising awareness about the plight of the Sudanese ever since the Darfur conflict in the mid-2000s.
Nobody cares about Sudan.
I said I'm George Clooney, and I can make people care about South Sudan because I say I care. I mean, because I do care. I'm not acting now, this is real.
Damn it. Oh my god, you are George Clooney, winner of an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Sudan in 2, you say? Consider it done.
I'm a hero!
And therein lies the lesson for Stuart Hill. What he should have done was get Reese Witherspoon to do a tweet about Forvik's cruel subjugation by the British, and he
that
just
real?
might have got somewhere.
Oh, it looks like he's also keeping them in check, sort of. George Clooney launched a report exposing financial corruption among South Sudan's warring elites, documenting state thievery in the troubled nation. The very guerrillas come governors Clooney and the report authors were now censoring. They're the ones that they tried to put in power? So they got independence, but they still have issues.
What he should have done was get Reese Witherspoon to do a tweet about Forvik's cruel subjugation by the British, and he just might have got somewhere.
Around the world, there are but dozens more examples of are they or aren't they countries.
Transnistria? One of the big Transnistrian features is its healthy black market businesses, drugs, people trafficking, all the bad stuff. As crafty underworld types take advantage of this jurisdictional black hole. Catalonia, I've heard of that. Democracy can be a funny thing. Catalonia in northeastern Spain does enjoy some freedom of its self-government from Madrid, including running its own schools, healthcare system, and police force. But on independence, the vote has come out in favor of independence, but pro-democracy Spain says the whole thing doesn't count, as holding a vote in the first place was illegal. Bound to hit the news again within the next decade. Scotland for hundreds of years, the 4 countries that formed the United Kingdom have acted just like countries with flags, capitals, and da-da-da-da-da-da. Big shouty Twitter arguments about whether and when this might happen are inevitable over the coming years. I did a video reaction about whether or not Scotland would be independent soon. There is a movement because of Brexit. A lot of people in Scotland don't like the whole Brexit thing. Sealand. The very small World War II naval fort of the coast of Essex was built just a bit too far away from the coast to be considered part of the UK, and therefore it's technically in international waters and therefore up for grabs. In 1967, fisherman Paddy Roy Bates turned up to the abandoned fort with the intention of running a pirate radio station, but instead decided to declare it an independent country, which his son is the king of to this day. It even has its own football team who play other non-countries you haven't heard of, such as Tamil, Elam, and Aquitania. Sealand. Cooper World Jonesania. I've heard of this before. This is a Matman joke. Even though no territory has been clearly demarcated for the somewhat flippant would-be country of Cooper World Jonesania, and even though it doesn't have much of a raison d'etre or political ideal, let alone institution, and even though it doesn't have much motivation to actually be a country, it does have a flag. Lovely. In 2005, comedian Danny Wallace did a stunt for a TV show where he declared independence from Britain by sending a polite letter to Tony Blair and then set up his own country in his flat. By popular vote, his new nation was named Lovely. 50,000 viewers signed up to be citizens via the show's website, despite not being allowed to know their country's address. But apparently, it was somewhere in East London. I like that flag a lot. Christiania? The former military base in the Danish capital Copenhagen sat abandoned for many years until 1971, when a bunch of hippies broke down the barricades and began squatting there. Nowadays, approximately 900 people live in the area, and the community have their own rules and regulations completely independent of the Danish government. Most notably when it comes to the sale of marijuana. Danes have a mixed, uneasy relationship with Christiania, depending on who you ask. Interesting and idealistic social experiment or lawless crackdown that shouldn't be tolerated. Bit of a stretch to call it a country, but it is commonly considered to be quite cool, not that we'd know. These guys, they took the time to write all this. The Vatican is famously the smallest country in the world. Only is it? The UN doesn't list the Vatican as a country, but it does list the Holy See as a UN observer state, meaning it gets to speak but doesn't get to vote. The Holy See is not the Vatican. The Holy See is just the Pope's office itself. What? So the Pope's office is recognized by the UN as a sovereign nation, but the Vatican is simply considered a city-state under the Holy See's jurisdiction. Confused? Yes, same. If the office of the Pope can be an independent nation, then I feel like the Lakotas and the Australian tribe should too, right? Canada? Since 1867, the North American territory of Canada has functioned much like a country with its own government flag and prominence on the world stage. This nation is not without its controversy, however. Geography teacher Mark Cooper Jones once left it out when listing every country in the world by heart. for days afterwards, insisting to his pupils that this was due to its status as not a real country. That's hilarious. So Mark, one of the map men, is a geography teacher, and he made a mistake in class one day by leaving Canada out, and he stuck to it by lying to his students. He could not admit a mistake. That's hilarious.
Many behave exactly like countries with passports, governments and currencies, and whilst not having a comfy chair at the United Nations, do still feature on the maps of their political allies, Palestine, Taiwan and Kosovo, to name but 2.5.
What does it say? I'm not writing this one, Jay. Neither am I, Mark. Okay. Gosh, these are tiny. Loath to go into this on a silly card that very few of you will even bother to read, as we should almost definitely do a whole Mapmen episode about it. But long story short, Taiwan is the retreated to home of the old rulers of China, Republic of China, who lost the long civil war to the Chinese Communist Party in the early part of the 20th century. It's semi-autonomous and isn't technically part of China, depending on who you ask. Interestingly, China thinks Taiwan is part of China, and Taiwan agrees, but it thinks it owns China. We should definitely do an episode about this, shouldn't we, Jay? Taiwan thinks it owns China? Yugoslavia broke up and things got complicated. The melting pot of intersuspicious ethnic groups previously held together by much-loved Tito started to draw up national boundaries, but it was predictably messy and difficult, nowhere more than in tiny Kosovo, which had to battle long and hard before declaring independence from Serbia in 2008 following prolonged NATO intervention. The USA and much of Western Europe recognize this sovereignty, but Russia and Serbia don't, meaning it's yet to gain full international recognition as a UN member state. Fun fact, Tony Blair is a popular Kosovan male name after British PM Tony Blair. Tony Blair? Tony Blair. Huh. Who famously forced NATO's hand in intervening in the region. That's hilarious.
Despite the UN being a very popular method by which to judge the countryness of a country, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as official. The world map looks different depending on which country you're looking at it in, and countryness will always be a grey area.
Does that mean I can declare my half of the desk an independent country?
Yes, but I'd only invade.
And I deserve it.
So, to start a new country, you really just need to declare it. I feel like in the past I've seen a map of the United States where there are actually other countries inside of it. Molossia started as a teenage dream of Kevin Bogg and began as the Kingdom of Molossia in 1998 when he bought land in Nevada. So how do you start a new country? You just start it. You just declare it. That's all. And get a celebrity to endorse you and send out some tweets. Maybe do an interview on Entertainment Tonight. Another wonderful Mapman video. Thank you all for recommending. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Later.